1 hour from now, Brian Geltzeiler going to join us. Is it better for the Cavs to just stand pat at this point? They were apparently, I wouldn't say in the race for Kevin Durant, but they were standing around the starting line, seeing whether or not they could maybe make a move for Kevin Durant. Didn't happen. Whether or not the Cavs should just stand pat with what they have right now with Brian Geltzeiler coming up at 9:22 this morning. Browns camps, OTAs, they ended. Next up is training camp coming up in July. A big conversation about whether or not a rookie quarterback, can start week one. All right, if you guys want to have that conversation, which quarterback is closer to starting in week one? Because the Browns sit right now. It's Dillon Gabriel if you're going to start a rookie in week one, which I don't think either rookie's going to start. But we'll find out with Lance Reisland, who joins us right now. He's a special at Cleveland.com, does a lot of film work for them, former head coach, color analyst, Spectrum News or Spectrum Sports, and he's on the North Homestead Chrysler Jeep Dodge Ram hotline. Coach, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys.
So, Lance, when you look at what's been going on here with these rookies and the conversations we've had over these last few weeks about these rookies, which one, if they were going to start one week one, which is something Daniel Jeremiah said on Rich Eisen a couple days ago, which rookie would you go with? Which rookie do you think would you go with? And then which rookie do you think they would go with?
Well, I'll be honest with you. Neither are ready to play right now, and I don't think neither of them are very close. However, if I had to pick, I'd pick Dillon Gabriel, and here's why. Dillon Gabriel played at 3 high-level schools, played at Oklahoma, UCF, and then finished at Oregon. So he's seen a lot of different things, right? So I'm not sure if he's necessarily better, but he has more experience in different things, right? So he's played underneath center. He understands play action. He's, been a part of RPOs. And when you play for all those different coaches, you're learning different ways to read coverages. You're learning how to read fronts. You're learning how to do things. So I think it gives him an advantage just because he's seen a bunch of different things. I think Sanders is going to be very good. However, he's going to have to work on his footwork. Everybody talks about some of the things he's done off the field. For me, it's on the field. He's done a lot of great things. And I think some of his footwork that he needs to work on came from just having just an awful offensive line at Colorado. And when you have that offensive line kind of always being pushed back into you, you kind of learn to drift a little bit. And for me, that's what he's going to work on as he becomes a pro, is learning to step up in the pocket, learning how to move left and right. That's where he lacks right now. It has nothing to do with his talent. He has a lot of talent. He can do a lot of good things, but that footwork is what's holding him back. Dillon Gabriel is very polished. He's very polished with his delivery, and he's very polished in what he does and what he sees on the field.
What do the Browns need to do to set those two guys up for success?
Well, I'll tell you what, I think, being down there through the whole part of this summer process, I think the Browns, going back to what my dad always said, you got to get these guys all up to speed to give them a fair chance to fight for the job, right? So if you're right now, Joe Flacco is not getting a ton of work because he knows it. And the reason I think Joe Flacco should be the starter is because he not only does he know the offense, but he allows the rest of his offense to play at a top speed, which is kind of why they've gotten off to such slow starts, is because they're not super physical in practice. Now, what they're doing with these young guys, they had multiple fields going. The first time I've seen that in a couple of years, where everybody is getting reps and they're learning this offense. So when they get to camp, they're going to have a realistic shot of trying to, improve their spot on the depth chart. But more importantly, can they compete at the highest level? And that's the one thing that I was been very impressed with Stefanski and his staff, is that these guys all the rookies are getting up to speed. So when live bullets start flying around, they have a chance to be successful.
Why do people talk about rookies starting week one for the Cleveland Browns? Is it because of the Browns' reputation? Is it because of lack of any faith in Joe Flacco or Kenny Pickett? What is it?
Well, it's funny. The quarterback position, obviously, it's the most important position in sports in terms of like the success of your team, right? Even though it's a team sport, that quarterback has to be really, really good. And I'm not sure why people are pushing for these rookies to start, and because they're not ready. And when these guys are 3rd and 5th round picks, and regardless of the talent or regardless of what you had, like Sanders, for example, for me, Sanders, one of his greatest qualities is his ability to make plays. And that doesn't show up in his arm talent. That doesn't really show up in his footwork or the combine type of stuff, right? He's a gamer. Dillon Gabriel's 5'10", and everybody has asked me, he's under 5'10", he'll never make it. We played at Oklahoma and Oregon and UCF. Those tackles weren't 6 foot there. They were 6'5", 6'2". So he's learned how to manipulate those things. But as rookies, there's very few Daniels out there, right? There's very few guys that can come in and impact right away. Those guys have to come in, and it's really the speed of the game, right? And if your footwork is off just a little bit and you're late in the NFL, that's an interception. So these guys got to play when they're ready. And I've said it before, I'm not sure developmental, we got to take a look at these guys. I'm not really big on that because you have to win games as a coach, because if you're going to develop guys, you won't be around when they're developed, right? So you got to go out and you got to win games. You got to win games now. And right now, for me, that's Joe Flacco with these guys coming along and continue to work on their skill.
Lance Reisland with us on the North Homestead Chrysler Jeep Dodge Ram hotline. And as we talk about these rookie quarterbacks, one of the things we talked about earlier in this show was the wide receiver position, what the Browns have there right now. How important is that spot as you talk about developing a rookie quarterback, is who they're throwing to on the outsides?
I'll tell you what, I take a little different stance on this than most. The idea that they drafted both Jungins and Sampson, then they went out and got obviously they got Fannin with Njoku. I think they're very high in Sed Tillman, and I think he was really good at progressing until he got those concussions. Obviously, Jerry Jeudy's a legit number one. So what it tells me is that they're playing to their strengths, right? It tells me that they're playing to that defense. And offensively, it tells me they're going to be in 12 personnel. And that's where I think Kevin Stefanski really shines. And that's why I think he likes guys like Gabriel and Sanders, their ability to process information, because in that 12 personnel, he can kind of dictate what he's going to do to the defense. And he can kind of dictate what personnel they're putting in the game. And I think them not going out and getting another top receiver kind of tells you that they have high hopes in Sed Tillman. Can Woods or Thrash or any of these other guys come along? I think they're banking on one of those guys, but they're saying we're going to control the football. We're going to run the football. We're going to shorten the game. We're going to protect the defense. We're going to end every drive in a kick. And if we can do those things, we can sneak out more games than people think, because offensive line wise, going back to what they do really well, and that defensive line to me is top 3, top 5 in the NFL with the depth. So I think they're saying when you see who they drafted and who they didn't draft at receiver, where they're kind of going with this offense, and they're going to be defensively, that's going to be their strength.
What do you say, Coach Lance Reisland joining us on the show, what do you say to fans who are like, well, we got to see him by the end of the year or we're wasting the year with either one of these rookies? Because I think that they get to see him, the coaches get to see him in practice every day, but the argument that we need to see him, I don't know, man. We've seen a lot of bad quarterbacks come out as rookies, and they've just stayed bad.
Well, I'm not, once again, though, I'm going to take the coaches, and I know you coach too, Ken. I'm not a big believer in the we got to see these guys. Those guys have to prove that they can play. One of the most overused words in football is the word culture. And culture is not what you say, it's what you do. And if you're going to say, hey, we got to take a look at these guys, you're telling everybody else that winning is not important. You're telling everybody else on that team that, hey, when we go out there, we got to see what everybody can do because we're building to the future. Well, if you're 28, 29, 30 years old, why are you there then? And I think signing Myles Garrett and do the things they're doing, they're showing that they want to win. And as a coach, I like that, right? So if Kevin Stefanski is, they want Kevin Stefanski to develop these guys, then they're saying, then you better let him lose games. Well, I don't know about you, but losing games is never an option in the NFL. So, they have to go out, they have to produce, they have to win, they have to put the best guys out there to win. They got to show that winning is the most important thing. And like I said, culture is not what you say, what you do. And you have to prove to everybody in that locker room and everybody on that staff and everybody in the organization that winning is the most important thing.
You brought up the defensive line. I think it's fair to say we expect this Browns defense to be a pretty good unit this year, but I do think that you have to score points to win games in the NFL. So I am curious from your perspective, what exactly does this offense need to be this year for the Browns in order for them to be maybe not even an above 500 football team, but a competent, close to winning football team?
Well, the first thing the offense has to do is they have to end every drive in a kick and not create short fields for that opposing offense, right? So if the opposing offense has to go 80 yards every time they get the ball, that's going to be very tough to do against this defensive front. This defensive line is very, very big. I think Malik Collins is a huge get for these guys. I think Jenkins is a good guy in the secondary. So they have guys. Obviously, Mason Graham was number one on my board because of the fact he can anchor in there and rush the passer. But what the offense has to do is kind of be boring. And people don't like boring, but boring can win you football games. So you got Bloomgren back in, tells you they're going to go back to the weak side zone. They're going to go back to power, counter, pin and pull. They have to move the chains. They have to shorten the game, right? So even if they don't score points, they got to flip the field, right? So if they can, Bjorkes has been killing the ball. He's a great punter. So use him as an offensive weapon. I know it's not what everybody wants, but that's kind of offensively, that's kind of where their skill's at right now, right? So run the ball, shorten the game, Get it to 2nd and 5. That's what Junkins is going to do a great job of. Get it to 2nd and 5, 2nd and 6. Then whoever your quarterback is has a much better chance, and the coordinator has a much better chance. Now, you're talking about, we go back to, what about the receiver position? Well, if you can get it to 2nd and 5, now you can do some play action shots where you just have 2-man routes or maybe a 1-man route. Once again, those things aren't exciting, and they're not always successful, but that's where the Browns are at, and that's what Kevin Stefanski does very well. It's kind of going back to what he does well. He kind of maximizes those guys, in my opinion, that don't have the elite talent. They just got to, the big thing for that offense is they got to end every drive in a kick. They got to protect that defense. And what does that mean? 3rd and 8, run the ball, punt it once in a while, so you're not turning the ball over as much.
Lance Reisland joining us on the show from Cleveland.com, also Spectrum Sports, former head coach. DeJuan Jones over left tackle. Can you give me a percentage on what his success rate will be this year and beyond right now?
Oh, I'm very high on DeJuan Jones. Last year I was sitting in the bleachers watching him, and it's kind of disappointed at camp because he was out of shape, obviously coming back from that knee injury. And DeJuan Jones is a guy who uses his size. Even with those guys down there, he uses his size to his advantage, those long arms and pass protection. Now, going back to what they do offensively is another reason I think he can be successful, right? In this zone game, right, he doesn't have to be a mauler. Conklin's a mauler, but the guards and center have to be the maulers. Those are the guys who are getting the big double teams. DeJuan Jones can be really successful because of his size. So if they run that zone, he's got to kind of be a wall in there. He doesn't have to kill the guy. He's got to be a wall in there. And he's not a vertical displaced guy. What I mean by that, he's not a guy who's going to kill you off the ball like Teller and Batonio and Conklin like to do. He likes to use his athleticism, get in the way, and create a wall. That works great on this, on the zone game. On the counter game, if he's a guy who's in pulling, he's got great feet for a big guy, especially now that he's in shape. I say this, if DeJuan Jones is in shape and DeJuan Jones is motivated, he can be a legit left tackle in the NFL. He's got to keep himself in shape, because once he loses that, then he gets beat around the edge, right? Because then his feet get heavy because he's a little bit overweight. So if he can stay in great shape, he's got a chance because of what they're doing offensively and his skill set, right? He can move to left to right. He's a former basketball player, so he's got great feet, and that'll help him. He's just got to make sure he does the right thing personally and keep himself in great shape.
Is that a Mike Bloomgren difference from last year to this year?
Oh, there's no question. I think, going Bloomgren, obviously connection with Callahan, one of my favorite things to do at practice every day when a couple years ago was go down and watch Callahan, coach. He's an absolute, he tells you the why of an offensive lineman. And what people don't understand is that it's such a complex position to play, and why they do things and how they do things. And that's, those are grown men. And the thing that I always liked listening to Callahan was he would give those guys, this is why we're doing something. And the reason we have to practice like this, and the reason we have to hit, and the reason that, this is where the linebacker will be, and this is the front we see. He was so great at explaining those things. So not only was he fundamentally sound as a coach, but he told those guys the why. And Bloomgren's kind of the same way. He's going to have these guys in the right spot. And if they're in shape, and that's one of the things I was most impressed with at camp, all the 5 of those guys looked to be in great shape. So I think it is a Bloomgren influence. And I think it's the influence of going back to what Stefanski does. And, it's not always what you put in as an offense coordinator, it's what you can fix. And now that Stefanski's got the keys back to the car, he's going to run his stuff, and Bloomgren's going to be a part of that.
How do Judkins and Sampsons fit into this run game?
Well, for me, it's the Browns on both sides of the ball to be successful this year have to win on first down. And you talk about the quarterback position. Well, the best friend for a quarterback is the run game. And people always say, and that's kind of cliche, but what that really means is if you can win on first down, you dictate what you do to the defense as a coordinator, right? So if it's 2nd and 5, that defense has to stay in a base look because of the fact that you can run or pass. When you lose on first down, now you start to get those exotic fronts and those exotic coverages and blitzes. And that's when interceptions happen. That's when fumbles happen. That's when mistakes happen on an offense because you've lost on first down. For me, first of all, Junkins is much more of a breakaway guy than I thought. But without question, he's a guy, really thick lower body. He can get you to 2nd and 5, 2nd and 6. And when you get to 2nd and 5, 2nd and 6, like I said, you dictate now. That also allows for play action shots because those guys have to watch, those secondary guys have to help on the run and things like that. So winning on first down is the key. Sampson's going to be a great, he's not too different than Junkins. He's a home run hitter as well. But Junkins is the guy for me that gives them to 2nd 6, which I think is vital for the success of this football team, especially those young quarterbacks, whoever's at quarterback.
I think we might have lost. You there?
I'm here.
Okay, for a second, I thought we lost you there for a second. Coach, we thank you so much for the time. Really outstanding stuff. Thank you so much, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Absolutely, guys. Thanks for having me. Talk soon.
Finally, some common sense.